Hi, welcome back to Spring CS170. We're going to start the pivot tables. Hopefully I can cover all of the pivot table topic in this video, and that should be the main topics for this week, week 12. I'm going to be able to put in a couple other extra short videos based on any feedback or questions that you guys might email me, or I might pick up from Piazza. But I plan for this to be the last lecture for this week. Okay. All right. So here we are, pivot tables. All right. And I think there's some similarity to tables. That's why I kind of put the tables first and then put the pivot tables next, because I kind of feel like pivot tables build on top of like the regular tables that you've been working with, similar to how the tables kind of built on to just using a straight data filter. So it kind of makes sense to me to do tables first and then do pivot tables now. So you look at this, you have essentially you want to make a database really. And you want to make sure the data in there is pretty good. So there's certain assumptions. So, you can imagine if your data quality is not that good, there's some weird things in the data. It's going to cause problems for making the pivot table in this case, right? So you have no blank rows, no blank columns. You don't put subtotals in those. And just make sure the columns are unique, right? And there's kind of a reason for that. Like, a lot of the stuff with the pivots is going to be based off of like these column names. So if you put two of the same column names, obviously that's going to confuse Excel. Okay, so these are pretty important rules to make sure the quality of your data is not going to impact your ability to create a pivot table. Okay, so make sure you keep these in mind. All right. And I uploaded the vegetables empty Excel sheet into the resources, and I have a copy of it open right now. And, it's a fairly straightforward table. It's actually not even that big, right? You can see it only goes like this many records, right? So 100 records. So it's fairly easy for you to just eyeball it and see whether the data looks okay, right? So just looking at this fairly quickly, data looks decent, right? Doesn't look too odd or anything like that. And so you see this here. And basically this describes it, right? So you can summarize the data, you can kind of slice and dice it in different ways, and I'll show that to you in a second. So similar to the table, you want to click on just one cell, right? And then you want to do the insert the pivot table, and then adding on to it, you'll be able to select the rows, the values, and the filter area. And I'll show that to you in a second. But the first 2 points are very similar to a table. Okay. Again, if you select more than one cell, you're going to cause a problem, right? So only select one cell in that area that you want to do something with. And then you do the insert pivot table into the sheet. And once you do that, you'll start to see something like this, right? So on the right-hand side, this is the main thing, right? So you want to say, okay, what do you want to show? And then how do you want to apply a filter? How do you want to set up the rows and the columns? And then how do you want to set up basically the summations of all of these, right? We call it summations, but you actually can do a couple other things with it, but I'll get to that in a second. All right, so we're at this point in the slide. So let me roll this down a bit and let me do the same thing here. So we're going to be here and we're going to be here, and then you can see pivot table here. Okay. All right. So you can see same thing with the table. It automatically knew to pick this whole range here, even though I only selected the one cell. Okay. You could tweak this, but I don't really see a reason why you would ever do that, assuming you set up the table correctly. And we want to do this into a new sheet, right, which is the default thing here. It gets kind of confusing if you kind of set up your pivot here on the same sheet, and then you want to kind of do things with the original table. It's just best if you just set up in a new sheet so you can kind of break that out. So We'll do that. And here you go. You can see it has a sheet 1 here that it creates. And you can select on these things here. Okay. So what do we have here? Well, we want to do the product, amount, and country. So let's click on that. So we have the product, we have the amount, and then we have the country. Okay. So right away, even without me doing anything, you can see Excel kind of put all these together. And you can see here, actually, let me make this bigger. So let me do the zoom. And I'm going to make this 175. 75. Right. I think that should be reasonable to read. Okay. And you can see down here, you see product, country, and then you have the sum of the amount here, right? But over here on the sheet, we basically broke out the filter here. You see how there's a country and a filter here? That comes from this over here, right? So let's move the country up. So all I have to do is take this country and then drag it up to filters, and there you go. And so what does it mean when I say I have a filter on the country? All that means is I'm like right here, you can click on this little arrow here, and then I can select Canada, France, New Zealand, United Kingdom, or USA. So let me select Canada. And then I select OK. And there you go, you got Canada. And then you show all the different fruits that are coming out from Canada and summing up the amounts. Okay. And then here you have the sum of the values. So this is a sum of the amounts here. See here. And you can see it defaults to sum. Okay. Like I said, it doesn't have to be the sum of the amount. Look, you can see, you can do an average here, right? Maybe you care about the average for some reason, right? Max, min, product, and all the statistical stuff here. In this case, I'll leave it as sum, but I just want to show you this so you can see that you have these options here. Okay, so again, you can select on this and play around with this to see what you want to do. Okay, there you go, just a repeat of that. Okay, let me see here. These are dollars. And we go here. Okay, so first things first, I played around with the country part here, and now we want to do some sorting here. So let's go over here to do the sorting. You see this part here, and similar to what you saw on the filters on the data, right? And I'll flip back to that a second, right? But you can see the same thing, right? You can do the sort, A to Z, Z to A. You can even like pick which of the fruits you want to show, right? But all of these different types of things are pretty much the same thing as what you did before when you had a filter here. So let me do this. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to go here. I'm going to go here. Okay. Here and here, two different things. But look, you can see same type of concept here, right? I can do the sorting, and I can pick between these couple of things. I can click them off and on. Okay. So I just want to kind of show you the commonality, right? So there's different levels, whether it's just the regular filter, the data filter, which is this up here, or if I were to do a table, or if I were to do this pivot here. Okay. So this is like this filter part here. This filter part here is very similar to what you've encountered already for the table and for the data filter. Okay. So on the summary calculation, this is what I kind of highlighted before, where you can change the value field settings, and you can do count, average, max, min, stuff like that. So whatever suits your need, right? In this case, like I said, I'm happy to keep it as the sum of the amount here. Okay. Actually, so I'm here, and go back to here, to do this, and I'm going to make this a currency. Okay. Kind of think that looks a little bit better. Actually, in terms of dollars, maybe I don't even need the cents or anything like that. But I guess, yeah, we should show the cents. So let me just repeat that. I might have gone pretty fast with that. Let me just repeat that so you can see what I did here. So you can see right here, the number format. So instead of doing sum, count, average, or whatever, I did the number format, and that brings it up to here. Okay. You know, actually, just for the heck of it, let me lower the decimal places here. And then I'm going to apply it. And that's what you get. Okay, so it kind of makes it look a little bit prettier. You have like all of the dollar sign. You can see it's a currency. You can see the comma here. So very quickly, you can look at this and see this. Let me change the country on this filter here. Let me go to France. And notice this thing here. I can select multiple items if I want, but let me just do France for now. Okay, and then let me do multiple selection here, and then here, and New Zealand, let's say. Okay, so lots of different ways you can play around with this filter. I'm just going to keep it simple with France here. So I like to see the label France here. So that's why I did just one instead of selecting multiple items. Okay, so again, these are things you can try out. Okay, so we can change the summary calculation. Again, I want to keep it to be an amount, but on your own, you can change that summary calculation. Again, you're back here, and this is the field, the sum of the amount that you want to play around with. Okay, so now I'm gonna drag things around. So let me see what they want us to do. Create another pivot table on another sheet. And we're gonna do the rows for the country and the columns, we're gonna do product. All right, so that's fine. So let's do that. We'll create a new one. I'm gonna do a pivot. So I do the insert, pivot, new sheet. All right, and what is it that we need to do? We need to do a country and a product. And we do that amount. And then we want to do a filter on a category. All right, we got a number of things here. So let's see, country products, we got country and product. And we want the country in the row and the product in the column. So product to the column. We have the country in the row. And then we want the amount, and then we want a category in the filter. So let's put the category here. Category goes to the filter, and then we want the amount. All right, and that should be good here. Let me make this bigger so you can see it on your screen. I'll make this 175 again. 5, just like so. All right, so I think this should line up to what else they want to do. So they want row for the country, product for the column. We got the values, the amount for the values, and then we got the category for the filter, right? Yep, that's what it looks like. And that's what we should end up. And that looks like what we have here. Looks right. Yeah, 23, 283,083, 283,003. All right, looks like we did what they want us to do. Good. So we want to do an interactive chart here. Okay. So let's see what that looks like. Okay. Say insert and say I kind of like the 3D chart, but looks like I want to do something else with this. So let's do this. Okay, so that kind of lines up to this. Okay, and you can see here, let's say I think it's too cluttered. Maybe I don't want to show so many of these. So let me take out this and this, something like that. And you can see what happens here. Okay, so this one of the things you should kind of pay attention to when you're doing these type of things. So if I do this, if I select, let's say I select all of these here. So it happens that, we kind of put a certain range, like these all happens to be in the thousands here. And it kind of fits nicely here, but kind of like there's a little bit too much data here actually, right? And I can cut it down by country also, obviously, but I think probably more the problem is the products that we're trying to cover here. And it just happens, like I said, the range is not too bad, but still a pretty wide range. So the problem when you have like charts, if you happen to have like very wide range of stuff, then you might have to go into like some sort of like logs or whatever. But let's say you have one type of product that's only like, tens or 20s or 30s, and then you have another product that has like tens of thousands, right? Or maybe even millions, right? Such a wide range on these will kind of really make these charts pretty difficult unless you have to do some sort of scaling before you get to that. So that's something that you want to watch out for when you prepare these type of things. Sometimes, you kind of have to get similar orders of magnitude on the data so that these charts will come out not really, distracting or whatever, right? But in this case, they're kind of in the same ballpark in terms of the numbers. So it's really just the amount of products that make a difference here. So I do this, right? It kind of looks a little bit clearer, a little bit easier to understand, right? You try to jam too much information into the chart. It's it technically is readable, but it's not really that readable, right? And so, when people find it very difficult to read your chart, they'll get frustrated and they'll just ignore it, right? Let's see here. So here I just, you saw what I just did here, right? I just picked a fruit here. You can see here, fruit, right? So again, that was another way for me to slice it up so you can see less of these columns here, right? But anyway, you have a lot of angles you can play around with here, right? And then you also have the sum of the amount here, which you can kind of play around with it here and you create the chart. But in terms of filters, you have this, you have this, and you have this, okay? So that's kind of what they mean when they say your interactive chart here. So I think everybody saw what I just did here, right? So I was on here and then I did the insert and then you have your charts just like you do for all your other times when you put charts in there, right? All right, so let's go back to here. So going back to here, you say, okay, let's say you want to visualize the data and you say, what type of chart here? So when you have the matrix type of view, you kind of want to be able to show it as like a bar chart, right? So in this case, you have like all these different products. In this case, we only filtered out to one country, right? And then you'd be able to show the lines like this, okay? So when you look at this, in this case, just like what you visualize, it sums up into a total number that you can break out into a pie chart, right? So the way I like to look at it is you look at it as a total number that you can slice into portions of a pie. And that's when a pie chart makes sense. When you have something where it's kind of like distributed across multiple products, but it's not like this is all part of a total number that you're trying to make into a pie. It makes sense to distribute it across like these bars like this. Okay, so hope that kind of makes sense in terms of distinguishing when you want to do a pie versus when you want to do a bar chart. Okay. As you saw before, you can do the filtering up here. Okay, you still have the whole sorting thing that we talked about. Okay, and so why do we use Excel? We do Excel looking at these type of like grids or matrix or whatever you want to look at it to answer some questions, right? So in this case, say, oh, which country sold the most bananas? Which fruit had the most sales? Vegetables had the least sales? Which country sold the least fruits and vegetables? Whatnot, right? So let's say look at the first one. Which country sold the most bananas? Well, okay, so here's the bananas here. Okay. And if you want to just take a look at that, in fact, you know what? Let me do this. I can take out everything and then just select bananas. Okay, so just very quickly right away, you can see, sure looks like Canada sold the most bananas, right? You can say, well, I could have looked at this too, right? Which is fine. You can do that too. In some cases, you might have like a whole bunch of these. It's not just like 5 countries, right? You could have a whole bunch of countries and it may not be so apparent. And then that's where you get this visualization here. And it's pretty easy to kind of see that. Okay. Of course, you also have to sort like that, right? So however you want to look at it, there's different ways to figure that out. But bottom line, this is a common question and it's a fairly straightforward question to answer when you have these type of tools in Excel, okay? Let's see here. Let me take this out, put this all back in here. Okay. But I already selected the fruit, I guess. So which fruit had the most sales? So this is here and yeah, so doing it visually here, you can't really do it unless I take out the country here. But what I can do here is you can see the grand total across the bottom here. Okay. And, because I had to filter with the fruit over here, then I can just look at this, right? So this is 33,000, 37,000, 54,000, and 30,000. And hence, you kind of would say this is your most fruit in terms of sales, right? Because this grand total is summing up all your countries. So on here, because I have all the countries, if I were to take this out, I would have to basically take out the country filter and just be able to group by everything for fruits. Here, I get it by showing the grand total. So the grand total, and then I just filtered on fruit to see where I can get the most, what's the biggest number here. Okay. So anyway, you can play around with this, but this is what a pivot table should be answering. And like I said, you can drag and drop these things all over, however you want to do it. Okay. And that would be it for pivot tables. Okay. So if there's any other questions that you have on either Excel or other topics for the course, just give me a shout. Like I said, if there's enough of you that's asking for it, I'll cut another video to review those things. All right. Thank you and have a good night.